The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday evening, turning the city streets into rivers of reflected neon lights. Maya clutched the small pharmacy bag to her chest, protecting it like it was made of gold. In a way it was. The medication inside had cost her 3 days' worth of meals, but her grandmother needed it. That was all that mattered. Her sneakers were soaked through, squishing with every step as she hurried down the sidewalk. The diner had been busier than usual tonight, which meant better tips, but it also meant she was running late. Her grandmother would be worried. She always worried when Maya worked the evening shift. Maya checked her phone at the crosswalk. 2 missed calls from Nana. She smiled despite her exhaustion. That woman could worry for an Olympic sport and take home the gold medal every single time. The light turned green, and Maya stepped off the curb. She never saw the car coming. One moment she was crossing the street, already composing the apology she'd give her grandmother for being late. The next moment everything went sideways, literally. The world spun in a chaos of headlights, rain, and screeching tires. Her body hit something hard, then she was flying. Then nothing but pain and wetness and the distant sound of someone shouting. The pharmacy bag landed several feet away, its contents scattered across the wet pavement. Inside the black sedan, Adrian's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. The car had hydroplaned. He'd been going too fast, he knew that. Always too fast, running from one meeting to the next, one deal to another, never stopping, never slowing down. And now this. He threw the car into park and stumbled out, nearly slipping on the wet road himself. The figure lying motionless in the street made his heart stop. It was a young woman. Her dark hair spread around her head like a halo, rain washing over her face. She wasn't moving. No, no, no. The words came out before he could stop them. Adrian dropped to his knees beside her, his expensive suit soaking up the dirty rainwater. His hands hovered over her, afraid to touch, afraid not to. Someone call an ambulance. Other cars had stopped now. People were getting out, phones already raised. Adrian barely noticed them. He was transported back 7 years, to another rainy night, another accident, another life he couldn't save. His little sister's face flashed in his mind. This couldn't be happening again, miss. Can you hear me? His voice cracked. He finally placed his fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. There. Weak but present. Stay with me. Please stay with me. The woman's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. They were brown, he noticed. Dark brown and confused, trying to focus on his face. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then her eyes rolled back and she was gone again. Adrian heard himself making promises he had no business making. That everything would be okay. That help was coming. That she was going to survive this. He didn't know if he was talking to her or to himself or to the ghost of his sister that seemed to hover over every tragedy in his life. The ambulance arrived in what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The paramedics moved with efficient urgency, asking him questions he barely heard. Was he family? No. Did he know her name? No. Was he the driver? Yes. They loaded her onto a stretcher with practiced care, and when they moved toward the ambulance, Adrian found himself standing. I'm coming with her. The paramedic looked at him like he was crazy. Sir, you should wait for the police. They'll need to take your statement. I said I'm coming with her. Something in his voice must have been convincing, because the paramedic just nodded and gestured for him to climb. Adrian had ridden in ambulances before, but only in movies and television shows. The real thing was worse. The confined space, the constant beeping of machines, the way the paramedics worked over her with controlled urgency. One of them cut open her jacket, revealing a cheap diner uniform underneath, stained with what might have been ketchup from hours ago. Her name tag was still pinned to it, slightly crooked. Maya. Maya, he whispered, testing the name. You're going to be fine, Maya. The paramedic glanced at him but said nothing, just kept working. Adrian watched the monitors, not understanding the numbers but desperately wanting them to be good ones. The ride to the hospital blurred into a series of moments. Oxygen mask IV line, radio communication with the emergency room, blood pressure dropping, internal bleeding suspected. At the hospital, they wheeled her away fast, through doors Adrian wasn't allowed to follow through. He stood in the hallway, dripping rainwater onto the linoleum floor, watching the doors swing shut behind her. A nurse appeared with a clipboard and questions. His information, his insurance. Did he want to contact his lawyer? Just save her, he said. Whatever it costs. Whatever she needs. I'll pay for everything. The nurse looked at him with something that might have been pity or might have been judgment. Sir, you should probably call someone. This is going to be a long night. Adrian did call someone. His assistant, who answered on the second ring despite it being almost midnight. Clear my schedule for tomorrow. Maybe the rest of the week. I don't know yet. And find out everything you can about a woman named Maya. That's all I have. Her name tag said Maya and she works at a diner somewhere in the downtown area. Mr. Blackwood, what's going on? Are you all right? Just do it, please. He ended the call and sank into one of the uncomfortable waiting room chairs. Hours passed. Adrian watched doctors and nurses rush past, none of them stopping to talk to him. He watched families arrive, crying, supporting each other. He watched the night shift change to early morning. His phone buzzed constantly with messages he ignored. Business emergencies that suddenly felt incredibly unimportant. A doctor finally approached him as dawn started breaking through the waiting room windows. The man looked tired, his scrubs marked with evidence of a long surgery. Are you here for Maya Rodriguez? Adrian stood so fast he nearly knocked over his cold coffee. Yes, how is she? She made it through surgery. We had to repair internal bleeding from her spleen and liver. She has 3 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and a severe concussion. The next 48 hours are critical, but she's stable for now. Can I see her? The doctor studied him with curiosity. Are you family? No, Adrian hesitated. What was he? The man who almost killed her? A stranger with guilt written all over his face? I'm the one who hit her. This is my fault. She's in the ICU. Normally we only allow immediate family, but she's alone right now. We found contact information for her grandmother in her phone. But the woman is in a nursing facility and can't travel. So yes, you can see her. Room 412. 5 minutes only. Adrian walked to room 412 on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. Through the small window in the door, he could see her lying in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and monitors. She looked small and fragile, and nothing like the determined woman who'd been rushing across that crosswalk with her pharmacy bag clutched to her chest. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The beeping of her heart monitor was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. I don't know if you can hear me, Maya, he said quietly, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I promise you, whatever happens next, I'm going to make this right. Outside the window, the sun continued to rise over the city, indifferent to promises made in hospital rooms and lives forever changed by one rainy intersection. Maya woke up 3 days later to white walls and the steady beep of machines. Her whole body felt like she'd been hit by a truck. Well, technically a luxury sedan, but the pain didn't know the difference. The first thing she saw when her eyes finally focused was a man asleep in the chair beside her bed. He was slumped awkwardly, his neck at an angle that would definitely hurt when he woke up. His clothes looked expensive but wrinkled like he'd been wearing them for days. She tried to remember who he was. The memories were fuzzy, like trying to see through dirty glass. Rain, headlights, flying. Then nothing but scattered images that didn't quite connect. A nurse walked in and smiled when she saw Maya's open eyes. Oh good, you're awake. Let me get the doctor. She glanced at the sleeping man. He's been here every day, you know. Barely leaves except when we force him to. The commotion woke him. He jerked upright, wincing as his neck cracked and his eyes went straight to Maya. For a moment they just stared at each other. Then he stood up so fast he nearly knocked over the chair. You're awake. Thank God you're awake. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it properly in days. Who are you? Maya asked, and watched something painful flash across his face. The doctor arrived and explained everything. The accident, the surgery, the concussion that had caused some memory loss. The man standing awkwardly by the window was Adrian Blackwood, the driver who'd hit her. He'd been covering all her medical expenses and had barely left the hospital since she arrived. After the doctor left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Adrian moved back to the chair but didn't sit down. He looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. You don't have to stay, Maya finally said. I'm sure you have better places to be. I want to be here. He paused. No, that's not right. I need to be here. Over the next few weeks, Maya learned why. Adrian visited every single day, usually arriving early and staying until the nurses kicked him out. At first, she resented his presence. He represented everything that was wrong with her life. Rich people speeding around in their fancy cars, never watching where they were going, never thinking about the regular folks just trying to survive. But slowly, her anger started to crack. He wasn't what she expected. He brought her books when she mentioned the hospital TV was terrible. Not expensive books or pretentious literature, but mystery novels and comedy collections that made her laugh. When her headaches got too bad to read, he'd sit there and read to her himself, doing silly voices for different characters that no billionaire should ever be caught doing. One afternoon, during physical therapy when Maya was struggling to walk more than a few steps without getting dizzy, Adrian asked if he could help. The therapist agreed, showing him how to support her properly. Maya leaned on his arm, frustrated by how weak her body had become. "I used to walk 10 miles a day between my 2 jobs," she muttered. "Now I can barely make it across the room." "You'll get there again," Adrian said quietly. "You're stronger than you think. You don't know anything about me, then tell me." So she did. Maybe it was the pain medication making her chatty, or maybe she was just tired of holding everything in. She told him about her grandmother, the only family she had left, about working 2 jobs just to keep them afloat, about the pharmacy bag she'd been carrying that night, medication that cost more than most people's weekly grocery bills. She told him about dreams she'd given up on, college applications she'd never finished, a life that felt like it was always just out of reach. Adrian listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. "My sister died in an accident like ours, 7 years ago." Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the expensive watch and the designer clothes. She saw grief, old and deep and never quite healed. "I wasn't there," he continued, his voice steady but his eyes distant. "I was at a business meeting in another city, closing some deal I thought was so important. She called me that afternoon, said she needed to talk about something. I told her I'd call her back later, but later never came. A drunk driver ran a red light and that was it. She was only 23. "I'm sorry," Maya said softly. "The thing is, I spent years burying myself in work, building an empire, making more money than I could ever spend. I told myself it was success, but really I was just running. And then I hit you, and for the first time in 7 years I stopped running. I had to stop. I had to be here, had to make sure you survived because—" He trailed off, looking at his hands. "Because you couldn't save her," Maya finished. He nodded, and something shifted between them. An understanding. They were both survivors in their own ways, both carrying weight they never asked for. As Maya grew stronger, their conversations grew longer. She told him about the neighborhood where she'd grown up, the small apartment she shared with her grandmother before Nana had to move to the care facility. She described the diner where she worked, the regulars who came in every morning for coffee and gossip, the community that looked out for each other because no one else would. Adrian talked too, though it clearly didn't come as naturally to him. He told her about the pressure of running a company worth billions, about family expectations and business rivals, and a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty. He admitted he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a real conversation with someone who wanted nothing from him. "Everyone wants something," he said one evening. "A deal, an investment, an introduction. You're the first person in years who's just real." Maya laughed, gesturing at her hospital gown and the IV still in her arm. "Yeah, I'm real all right. Really broke, really banged up, and really stuck in this hospital room." But her words didn't have the bitterness they once did. Something was changing and they both felt it. The day Maya was finally cleared to go home, Adrian helped her pack up the few belongings she had. The nurses gave her discharge instructions and medication lists. One of them hugged her goodbye and whispered, "He's a good one. Don't let that one go." Maya blushed and insisted they were just friends. But when Adrian drove her home in his car, the same car that had hit her, neither of them could ignore the tension in the air. He insisted on walking her up to her grandmother's apartment, carrying her bag like it weighed something. At the door, Maya turned to thank him, to say goodbye, and let them both get back to their separate worlds. But Adrian spoke first. "Would you have dinner with me? Not as an apology or compensation or anything like that, just as 2 people who've been through something together." Maya knew she should say no. Their worlds were too different. This was temporary, whatever this was. But when she looked at him standing there, hopeful and nervous in a way that probably terrified him, she found herself nodding. Okay, dinner, but somewhere normal. No fancy places where I need to know which fork to use. He smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Deal. How about that diner you always talk about? I want to meet these regulars who keep asking about you. They're going to interrogate you, Maya warned. Good. I could use some people who aren't afraid to tell me the truth. That dinner turned into coffee the next day. Coffee turned into a walk in the park. The walk turned into Adrian showing up at the diner during Maya's shift, sitting at the counter and making her coworkers giggle with how he watched her. Her grandmother, who Maya had been terrified to introduce him to, took one look at Adrian and declared him better than the last one, which wasn't saying much since the last one had stolen Maya's rent money and disappeared. 3 months passed in a blur of stolen moments between her shifts and his meetings. Adrian was different away from his corporate world. He laughed more. He relaxed. He started talking about changes he wanted to make to his company, ways to give back to communities like Maya's instead of just building over them. Maya was different too. She felt lighter somehow, like someone had taken some of the weight off her shoulders. Adrian had quietly ensured her grandmother received better medical care, though he disguised it through some hospital program so Maya wouldn't know it was him. He showed up when she needed help with bills, always with some excuse about a bonus or a settlement that didn't exist. They fell in love the way people do in movies, except messier and more real. With arguments about who should pay for dinner and whether it was okay for him to send a car to pick her up from work, with her teaching him to make scrambled eggs in her tiny kitchen, and him showing her his favorite spot in the city where you could see the sunrise. But neither of them talked about the future. Neither of them acknowledged the elephant in the room, that they came from different worlds, that his family would never accept her, that her pride wouldn't let her be someone's charity case, that everything good and right between them existed in a bubble that would eventually have to pop. The bubble popped the day Maya fainted at work and her coworker rushed her to the clinic. The same day Adrian's mother arrived in town, armed with ultimatums in the name of a suitable woman he should be dating instead. The clinic waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old magazines. Maya sat with her hands clasped in her lap, trying not to throw up. She'd been feeling off for weeks now. At first, she blamed it on stress, then on the lingering effects of the accident. But when she'd fainted in the middle of the lunch rush at the diner, nearly dropping a tray of plates, her manager had insisted she get checked out. The doctor called her back and ran through the usual questions. When was her last period? Had she been experiencing any other symptoms? Fatigue, nausea, mood swings? Maya answered mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She was thinking about Adrian, about the text he'd sent that morning saying they needed to talk. 4 words that never meant anything good. Well, Ms. Rodriguez, the doctor said, looking at her chart, I'm going to run a few tests, but based on your symptoms, I think we should check for pregnancy. Maya's heart stopped. That's not possible. But even as she said it, she was counting backwards in her head. The night after she'd been released from the hospital, when everything had felt fragile and precious and they'd stopped being careful about being careful. One night. Just one night. 20 minutes later, the doctor came back with a smile that made Maya's stomach drop. Congratulations. You're pregnant. About 8 weeks along. The world tilted sideways. Maya heard herself asking questions that didn't quite make sense. The doctor was talking about prenatal vitamins and follow-up appointments and things Maya couldn't process. All she could think was that she was carrying a billionaire's baby, and they'd never even talked about what they were to each other, let alone children. She walked out of the clinic in a daze, her phone clutched in one hand and the information packet about pregnancy in the other. She should call Adrian. She should tell him right now. But her fingers wouldn't cooperate. Instead, she found herself walking, just walking, trying to figure out how her life had gotten so complicated. Across town, Adrian sat in his penthouse office, staring at his mother. Victoria Blackwood had arrived that morning without warning, which was never a good sign. She stood by the window, perfectly composed in her designer suit, looking at him like he was a disappointing quarterly report. This has gone on long enough, Adrian. What are you talking about? Don't play stupid with me. The waitress. The accident victim, whatever you want to call her. People are talking. Your board is concerned. Do you know what the shareholders think about you spending your time in dingy diners instead of running the company? Adrian felt his jaw tighten. Her name is Maya, and what I do with my personal time is none of the board's business. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everything you do is the board's business. Everything you do reflects on this family, on this company. Your father built an empire, and you're throwing it away for some girl you barely know. I know her better than I've known anyone in years. You feel guilty. I understand that. The accident was traumatic, and you're a good person. But guilt isn't love, Adrian. And this girl, she's not right for our world. She doesn't understand it. She'll never fit in. Maybe I don't want to fit in anymore. His mother's expression hardened. Then you leave me no choice. The board has agreed. If you continue this relationship, you'll be removed from your position as CEO. Your trust fund will be frozen. You'll have nothing. I'll still have her. Will you? Victoria pulled out her phone and showed him a screen. We had investigators look into her background. Her father abandoned them when she was 6. Criminal record. Her mother died of a drug overdose. She's been one step away from poverty her entire life. What do you think happens when you show up with nothing? When you can't pay for her grandmother's care? When you can't fix all her problems with money anymore? The words hit harder than Adrian wanted to admit. Not because he believed Maya was with him for money, but because he'd been using money to solve her problems. Had he ever asked if that's what she wanted? Or had he just assumed? There's someone I want you to meet, Victoria continued. Charlotte Whitmore. Senator Whitmore's daughter. She's educated, sophisticated, from a good family. She understands our world. I've arranged dinner for tomorrow night. I'm not going. Then say goodbye to everything you've worked for. And ask yourself, will that waitress love you when you're as poor as she is? After his mother left, Adrian paced his office like a caged animal. His phone rang. Maya. He stared at her name on the screen, his thumb hovering over the answer button. But his mother's words echoed in his head. What if she was right? What if he was being selfish? What if dragging Maya into his world would only hurt her more? He let it go to voicemail. Then he immediately regretted it. Maya heard Adrian's phone ring once, twice, 3 times before his voicemail picked up. Her hands were shaking as she tried to figure out what message to leave. Hi, I'm pregnant with your twins. Call me back? No, that's not how you drop that kind of news. She hung up without leaving a message. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe the universe was telling her something. She stood outside his office building, looking up at the gleaming tower of glass and steel. She'd come here to tell him in person, but security wouldn't let her up without an appointment. She was just another face in the crowd, someone who didn't belong. The next 3 days were torture. Adrian called twice, but Maya didn't answer. She needed time to think, time to figure out what she was going to do. She worked her shifts at the diner, smiled at customers, and pretended everything was fine. At night, she lay awake, one hand on her still flat stomach, wondering how she was going to raise a baby on minimum wage and tips. On the 4th day, desperation drove her back to Adrian's building. This time she waited outside, hoping to catch him leaving. Hours passed. Her feet hurt. Her back ached. But she stayed because she had to tell him. He deserved to know, even if everything else fell apart. That's when she saw him. But he wasn't alone. A beautiful woman in an expensive dress walked beside him, laughing at something he said. They looked perfect together, like they belonged in the same magazine spread. The woman touched his arm familiarly, and Adrian didn't pull away. Maya felt like she'd been hit by that car all over again. She watched them get into a limousine together and drive away. Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. I'm sorry. This isn't working. My family is right. We're from different worlds. You deserve someone who can give you a normal life. She read the message 3 times, each time hoping the words would change. They didn't. Maya deleted his number, deleted their photos, deleted everything that reminded her of the last 3 months. Then she went home and started making plans. She'd leave the city. Maybe go to her aunt in Portland, who'd always offered her a place. She'd have the baby quietly, far away from Adrian's world. He'd never have to know. He'd never have to choose between his empire and a child he didn't ask for. She was good at surviving. She'd survive this too. The next morning, Maya called in sick to work and started packing. She'd leave tonight before she could change her mind, before she could do something stupid like try to fight for a man who'd already made his choice. She was folding clothes into a suitcase when the cramps started. At first, they were just uncomfortable. Then they got worse. Sharp, stabbing pains that made her double over. Something was wrong. She knew it in her bones. She called 911 and then, without thinking, she called Adrian. He answered on the first ring. Maya, thank God I've been trying to reach you. That text, I didn't send it. My mother took my phone, I just got it back and I need to explain. Adrian. Her voice came out weak and scared. Something's wrong with the baby. The line went silent for a heartbeat. What baby? Our baby. I'm pregnant and something's wrong. I'm going to the hospital. She heard him moving, heard car doors and shouting. Which hospital? I'm coming. Maya, I'm coming right now. The ambulance arrived before she could respond. The paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher, asking questions she couldn't focus on. All she could think was that she might lose this baby before Adrian even knew it existed. Before she could tell him that despite everything, despite the different worlds and the impossible odds, she loved him. She really loved him. At the hospital, they rushed her into an examination room. A nurse helped her into a gown while another started an IV. The doctor came in, young and efficient, ordering an ultrasound. Maya's hands shook as they positioned her on the table. We need to check for complications, the doctor explained. Try to stay calm. Stress isn't good for the baby. The door burst open. Adrian stood there, breathing hard like he'd run the whole way. His hair was a mess, his shirt untucked, and he looked more terrified than she'd ever seen him. Their eyes met across the room and everything else faded away. I'm here, he said, moving to her side. I'm not going anywhere. The ultrasound technician squeezed gel onto Maya's stomach and pressed the wand against her skin. The room fell silent except for the sound of the machine. Everyone waited, searching for that crucial heartbeat that would tell them if everything was okay or if Maya's worst fears were about to come true. The ultrasound room felt smaller than it was. Maya lay on the examination table, her hand gripping the edge so tight her knuckles went white. Adrian stood frozen near the door, his eyes locked on the monitor screen like it held all the answers to questions he hadn't known to ask. The technician moved the wand across Maya's stomach slowly, methodically. The gel was cold, but Maya barely felt it. All she could feel was her heart hammering against her ribs and the fear that any second now, the doctor would say those words nobody wanted to hear. I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat. Seconds stretched into eternities. The technician's face was unreadable, professional, giving nothing away. She adjusted the angle of the wand, pressed a little harder, moved to a different spot. Maya couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Beside her, she felt Adrian take a step closer, then another until he was right next to the table. Then, cutting through the silence like a miracle, came a sound. Fast, rhythmic, like horses galloping. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The technician smiled, and Maya felt tears spill down her cheeks before she even understood what she was hearing. There we go, the technician said warmly. Strong, healthy heartbeat. Maya's whole body went limp with relief. Oh, thank God, but the technician wasn't done. She moved the wand again, her smile growing wider. And let me just check. Yes, there it is. There's another one. Another what? Maya asked. Another heartbeat. You're having twins. The world stopped, just completely stopped. Maya turned her head to look at Adrian, to see his reaction, to gauge whether this was a disaster or a miracle or both. What she saw made her forget how to breathe all over again. Adrian wasn't gasping in shock. He wasn't stepping back or looking overwhelmed. He was walking straight to her, and his face was doing something she'd never seen before. It was crumbling. This powerful, controlled man who ran board meetings and commanded respect from everyone he met was falling apart right in front of her. He reached the side of the bed and dropped to his knees. Not carefully, not gracefully, but like his legs had just given out, and then he started crying, not quiet tears or dignified emotion. He was sobbing, his shoulders shaking, his hands covering his face. The doctor and nurses exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this reaction. Maya reached out, touching his head, confused and scared. Adrian, what's wrong? He lowered his hands and looked up at her, his face wet with tears, his eyes red. When he spoke, his voice was broken, raw. When they said complications, when you said something was wrong, I thought... He couldn't finish. He grabbed her hand and pressed it to his forehead, then to his lips. I thought I was going to lose you. I thought I was going to lose you the same way I lost her. Lost who? My sister, Lily. He was still on his knees, still holding Maya's hand like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. She called me that day. The day she died. She wanted to tell me something important. I was too busy for her. Too important. Too much work to do. His voice cracked. She was pregnant, Maya. She was going to tell me I was going to be an uncle. I found out at her funeral from the autopsy report. Maya felt her heart break for him. The doctor moved closer, concerned, but Adrian kept talking like he couldn't stop now that he'd started. She would have had a boy. They told me that too. He would have been 5 years old now. I think about that every single day. About the nephew I never got to meet because I was too busy to answer one phone call. He looked at the ultrasound screen, at the 2 tiny forms barely visible there. I failed her. I failed them both. And when you said something was wrong, I thought I was going to fail again. He turned back to Maya, and the look in his eyes was so intense it hurt. But you're okay. They're okay. He touched her stomach gently, reverently, like he was afraid she might disappear. You're giving me something I never thought I'd have. Not just children. A second chance. A chance to be there, to show up, to not fail the people I love. The nurse nearest to them wiped her eyes. Even the doctor looked moved. Maya didn't know what to say. She'd expected shock, maybe fear, possibly anger. She hadn't expected this. This complete, raw vulnerability. Adrian stood up, never letting go of her hand, and pulled out his phone with the other. His fingers shook as he dialed. When someone answered, he put it on speaker. Mother, it's me. Don't talk, just listen. I'm at the hospital right now. Maya is pregnant. With twins. My children. And I'm going to marry her if she'll have me. Which, given how badly I've handled everything, is a big if. He looked at Maya when he said that. A question in his eyes that made her heart flip. You said I had to choose between the company and her. I choose her. I choose them. I choose this life over everything else. If you can't accept that, then you've lost a son. Victoria's voice came through the speaker, sharp and disbelieving. Adrian, you're being irrational. You can't just I can and I am. I spent 7 years building an empire because I was too afraid to build a life. I'm done being afraid. I'm done running. These are my children, and Maya is the woman I love, and that's not negotiable. He hung up before she could respond. Then he looked at the medical staff, at the nurses who were trying not to cry, at the doctor who was watching with open surprise. I want you all to know, whatever she needs, whatever the babies need, cost doesn't matter. The best care, the best everything. And I'm not leaving. Clear my schedule for the next 6 months. I'm not going anywhere. The doctor cleared his throat. Mr. Blackwood, that's very touching, but not negotiable, Adrian repeated. His voice was steadier now, but his hand was still shaking in Maya's. I missed being there for my sister. I won't miss this, Maya found her voice finally. It came out smaller than she intended. You want to marry me? Adrian sat on the edge of the hospital bed, careful not to jostle her. I wanted to marry you before I knew about the babies. I was planning to ask you properly with a ring and everything. My mother showing up messed up the timing, and then that text she sent from my phone. He squeezed his eyes shut. I'm so sorry you thought I wanted to end things. I was trying to figure out how to propose without scaring you away. You're serious. You actually want this. Want us. Maya, I've never wanted anything more in my entire life. He touched her face gently. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. I know my world is going to fight this every step of the way. But I don't care. I'll walk away from all of it. The company, the money, the family name. I'll flip burgers at your diner if that's what it takes. Despite everything, Maya laughed. You'd be terrible at flipping burgers. Probably. But I'd try. For you, I'd try anything. The technician, who'd been quietly continuing the ultrasound during this entire exchange, spoke up. I hate to interrupt, but I need to finish the examination. The babies look healthy. But given your accident history, Maya, we need to monitor you closely throughout the pregnancy. Adrian nodded seriously. Whatever you need to do. What are the risks? What do we need to watch for? As the doctor explained the complications that could arise, Adrian listened intently, asking questions, taking mental notes. Maya watched him transform from the broken man on his knees to the focused, determined person he must be in board meetings. But this was different. This wasn't about business or profit. This was about protecting his family. His family. The thought made her dizzy. After the examination, after the doctor assured them both babies were fine and the cramping was just normal pregnancy discomfort, after the nurses finally left them alone in the room, Maya and Adrian just sat there. Her on the bed, him in the chair he'd pulled close, their hands linked between them. I'm scared, Maya admitted. Your mother is right about some things. I don't know your world. I don't know how to be the person you're supposed to end up with. Good. Because the person I'm supposed to end up with, according to everyone else, would make me miserable. You make me happy. You make me want to be better. You make me feel like maybe I deserve a second chance. He raised her hand to his lips. I'm scared too. I'm terrified I'll mess this up, that I'll work too much or make the wrong choices or somehow fail you and our kids the way I failed Lily. But I'm going to try. Every single day I'm going to try. What about your company? Your family? I meant what I said. They can accept us or I walk away. There are other jobs. There's only one you. Maya wanted to believe him. Part of her did believe him. But another part, the part that had grown up watching her father walk away, that had learned young that promises were just words, held back. As if reading her mind, Adrian leaned forward. I know you don't trust this yet. Trust me yet. That's okay. I'm going to prove it to you. Starting now. Starting with telling my mother exactly where she can put her ultimatums. He stood up, helped Maya into a wheelchair since the doctor wanted her to rest. And as he pushed her toward the exit, Maya heard him already making calls, canceling meetings, rearranging his life, choosing them over everything else he'd built. Maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. Maybe fairy tales did happen, even to girls from the wrong side of town who'd been hit by luxury cars. Maybe love really could bridge the gap between their two worlds. Or maybe it would all fall apart spectacularly. But as Adrian helped her into his car and buckled her seatbelt with careful hands, looking at her like she was made of something precious and irreplaceable, Maya decided she was willing to find out. The news broke 3 days later. Someone at the hospital must have talked. Or maybe it was one of Adrian's business rivals who'd been watching him. Either way, by Wednesday morning, every gossip site and business news outlet had the story. Billionaire Adrian Blackwood expecting twins with waitress girlfriend. The comments section was brutal. Maya made the mistake of reading them. Gold digger. Baby trapper. She's only after his money. She probably got pregnant on purpose. Each comment felt like a knife, but the worst part was the tiny voice in her head that wondered if they were right. If she'd somehow manipulated this situation without meaning to. Adrian found her crying in his penthouse, her phone clutched in her hand. He took one look at the screen and threw it across the room. Not violently, just done with it. Then he sat beside her and pulled her close. Don't read that garbage. None of those people know you. They don't know us. But what if they're right? What if I'm ruining your life? Maya, you saved my life. There's a difference. He tilted her chin up so she had to look at him. And for the record, the only thing getting ruined is my reputation for being a heartless businessman. Apparently, having emotions and caring about someone makes me weak in their eyes. I'll take weak over empty any day. The response to the news wasn't all bad, though. Adrian's assistant sent over a folder of messages from regular people. Thousands of them. Stories about their own unlikely love stories. About choosing happiness over status, about believing in second chances. There were young women who said Maya inspired them to believe they deserved more. There were men who said Adrian's vulnerability made them want to be better fathers and partners. You're becoming a symbol, his assistant told him during a video call Maya accidentally overheard. Our stock dipped initially, but it's climbing again. Younger investors love this. They're calling it authentic, human. The board is panicking, but the numbers don't lie. Still, the board called an emergency meeting. Adrian went dressed in his usual suit, but somehow different. More relaxed. He came back 3 hours later looking exhausted but satisfied. I'm out, he said simply. Resigned as CEO, they wanted me to choose, so I chose. Maya felt her stomach drop. Adrian, no. You can't just give up everything you built. I didn't give it up. I let it go. There's a difference. He loosened his tie and sat on the couch. I've spent 7 years building a company. Now I want to build a family. I can't do both. Not the way they both deserve. So I'm choosing the one that matters more. But what will you do? He smiled. I've been thinking about that. Remember how you told me about your neighborhood? How developers keep trying to tear it down and put up expensive condos that nobody who lives there can afford? Maya nodded. I'm going to do something different. Ethical development. Renovating communities instead of destroying them. Working with residents instead of pushing them out. It won't make billions, but it'll make a difference. You really mean that? I really do. I'm tired of being part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. The next challenge came from exactly where they expected. Victoria Blackwood requested a meeting. Maya wanted to refuse, but Adrian convinced her to give his mother one chance. They met at a quiet restaurant, neutral territory. Victoria arrived perfectly composed, but Maya noticed the cracks, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she gripped her purse too tight. "I owe you an apology," Victoria said, and Maya almost fell out of her chair. "Not because I was wrong about everything. I still think this is complicated and difficult, but I was wrong about why it matters." She looked at Adrian, really looked at him. "You're happy. For the first time since Lily died, you're actually happy. I've been so focused on protecting what your father built that I forgot to protect what matters more. You." Adrian's expression softened. "Mom, let me finish. When you called from the hospital, when you said you were choosing them, I heard your father in your voice. Not the businessman he became, but the young man I fell in love with before all the money and status. He was passionate and brave and willing to risk everything for what he believed in." Her voice cracked slightly. "I made him change. I pushed him to build the empire, to prioritize the company, to forget about what made him human. And it killed him. The stress, the pressure. He had a heart attack in his office at 57, and his last words to me were that he wished we'd done things differently." Maya reached across the table and took Victoria's hand. The older woman looked surprised, but she didn't pull away. "I don't want that for you," Victoria continued, looking at Adrian. "I don't want you to wake up at 57 wishing you'd made different choices. If this woman and these babies make you happy, then I need to accept that. I need to support that." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. There were still awkward moments and disagreements, but it was a start. Victoria even asked about Maya's grandmother, offered to help with her medical care without the pretense of charity programs, just family helping family. The pregnancy got harder as the months went on. Maya's body, still recovering from the accident, struggled with carrying twins. There were days she couldn't get out of bed, days when the pain was so bad she cried. Adrian was there for all of it. He learned to make her grandmother's special soup. He rubbed her feet when they swelled. He talked to her stomach every night, telling their babies about the life they were going to have. At 7 months, things took a scary turn. Maya's blood pressure spiked. The doctors put her on bed rest, warning that the babies might come early. Adrian moved her into his penthouse despite her protests, hired a nurse, and basically became a full-time caretaker. His mother visited weekly, slowly warming to Maya, sharing stories about Adrian as a child that made everyone laugh. Maya's grandmother came to stay too. Her health improved enough that she could travel. The penthouse became crowded and noisy and nothing like the sterile bachelor pad it had been. Adrian loved every minute of it. "This is what a home should feel like," he said one evening. "Surrounded by baby supplies and grandmother's knitting and the chaos of life happening. I've lived in expensive places my whole life, but I never had a home until now." Labor started at 34 weeks, 6 weeks early. Maya woke Adrian at 2 in the morning, terrified. The contractions were close together, intense. They barely made it to the hospital in time. The same medical team that had witnessed Adrian's breakdown in the ultrasound room rallied around them now. The delivery was long and difficult. Maya's body, weakened from the accident and the complicated pregnancy, struggled. There were moments when the doctors looked worried. Moments when Adrian held her hand so tight she thought he might break her fingers. Moments when she wanted to give up. But at 6 in the morning, as the sun rose over the city, their son came into the world. 3 pounds, 2 ounces, tiny but fierce, crying loud enough to wake the entire floor. 20 minutes later, their daughter followed. 2 pounds, 15 ounces. Quieter than her brother, but just as determined. Adrian cut both cords with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. When the nurses placed the babies on Maya's chest, skin to skin, he leaned over all 3 of them like he could shield them from the whole world. "You did it," he whispered to Maya. "You survived. They survived. We all survived." The babies had to stay in the NICU for 3 weeks. Maya and Adrian practically lived at the hospital, learning how to feed them through tubes, how to change diapers. That looked impossibly small. How to be parents to these fragile little humans who decided to join the world early. Victoria came every day, transforming into a doting grandmother who rocked babies and sang old lullabies. Maya's grandmother parked herself in the NICU waiting room, knitting tiny hats and blankets. The nurses joked that their babies had the most devoted family they'd ever seen. When they finally brought the twins home, Adrian surprised Maya one last time. He'd bought the building where her grandmother's apartment was, not to tear it down, but to renovate it. Every resident got upgraded units at their current rent. Her grandmother got the penthouse apartment fully accessible with enough room for family gatherings. "I want our kids to grow up knowing both worlds," Adrian explained. "Your world and mine. I want them to understand that money doesn't make someone valuable, that community matters, that people matter." 6 months later, they had a small wedding in the community center Adrian had helped build in Maya's neighborhood. No fancy venue or society guests, just family, friends, diner regulars, and construction workers who'd helped with the renovations. Maya wore a simple dress. Adrian wore jeans and the biggest smile anyone had ever seen. During his vows, he spoke about that rainy night. "I was speeding that night because I was running from a life that felt hollow. Hitting you was the worst thing I've ever done, and the thing that saved me. You survived something that should have destroyed you, and in surviving, you taught me how to live." Their son chose that moment to start crying from Victoria's arms, and everyone laughed. Their daughter, always quieter, just watched everything with big, curious eyes. 3 years later, Adrian's ethical development company was thriving, not making billions, but making a difference. Maya had gone back to school, studying social work, wanting to help people like her younger self who didn't know how to ask for help. Their kids were happy, healthy, growing up between penthouse and neighborhood, learning that home isn't where you live, but who you love. And sometimes, late at night, Adrian would stand in the nursery and watch his children sleep. He'd think about his sister Lily, about the nephew he'd never met. He'd whisper thank yous to them both, because somehow their tragedy had led to his redemption. Maya would find him there, wrap her arms around him from behind, and they'd stand together in the dark. Two people from different worlds who'd collided, by accident, and found everything they never knew they needed. Two people who'd survived, and in surviving, had learned what it really meant to live. The story that had started with tragedy and ended with joy. With a family built not on money or status, but on choice, on showing up, on choosing love every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard, and that, as it turned out, was the only happy ending that mattered.